Yeah. I'm a pediatrician. I'm originally from Iowa. I am one of four children. Lived and worked in the Rogue Valley for 10 years.
Okay.
And we came out here because pretty much any place that's not an urban or academic center area for healthcare is in major shortage of people that are willing to work in rural areas. And a lot of people don't think Medford is rural, but on the grand scheme of things, Medford is rural.
Yeah.
And they really needed pediatricians that were willing to work in the hospital and in a clinic setting. And that's true of so many communities across the US. So
Right.
I think this is
Thank you.
actually a really big differentiating piece for me. I have actually wanted to get in the ring to solve problems for a long time. When I moved to Oregon, I did not look up the politics of this district before I moved here. And when I looked at the politics, I'm like, holy shnikes, I am never going to be able to run until I'm like retired because one, the district is huge, and two, it's so red. It's so
Yeah.
red. And I don't know, the stories of my patients compel me to want to solve problems
Right.
because I am literally in rooms with people who are shamed by the government for being on Medicaid, for being on SNAP, for not staying home with their children, for yada yada. And I see so clearly in their lives that the reason they have the burdens that they do is not because they're not working hard enough. It's not because they need to go get more education. I mean, they would if they could, right? But we got to support them through it. It's because we have a system that's not working for them. And so, as much as I was like, this is an impossible district, I'm like, but somebody's like, got to get in there and do it. But I am not running as an act of resistance or out of anger or because it was either throw, something at the TV or get up and run.
Right.
I have
Yeah.
been wanting to be a part of problem solving for a long time. And in my day-to-day work, that is what I do is
Yeah.
listen, define the problem, and then come up with the steps forward in a collaborative way. And I think that's what we need to get back to on the political sphere. So I am running to solve problems. I am running now because I think there's a unique opportunity. And I'm running in this district rather than moving to a different district, which is what a lot of people tell you to do,
Yeah.
because I think that my background and my steps of feeling comfortable with being a Democrat are what a lot of our constituents are going to need to hear the words and see that pathway to feel comfortable with voting blue for the first time.
Right. So going back to running as a Democrat in very red
Yeah.
district, you also have a bit of a headwind when it comes to young left-leaning voters who are skeptical of the party.
Mhm.
Do you feel that, or do you
Oh, yeah.
reject the
Oh,
premise of that?
absolutely. Yeah. Very much so.
Yeah.
I have a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old myself, and I'm also very, aware of what Turning Point USA has been able to achieve. And let's not kid ourselves that they were just able to achieve it because we didn't do anything to earn it.
Oh, no, no.
There's an authenticity that young adults have always wanted to see. And again, the fact that we have repeated the same messages for 30 to 40 years and have so little to show for it says that it doesn't matter what our message is, it matters what our actions are, it matters
Right.
what the outcomes are. And so, the BS meters for young folks are always pretty sensitive. And they also want to see that people are able to get things done. And I think that's where a lot of it comes from. I think they also understand, even if they weren't born in the Jerry Maguire era, the show me the money. I
Right.
think we all actually understand it. We just want to ignore it, but it's
Right.
there. It's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And, um, you know, the other thing that I think is so true is that the young folks are doubting for the first time that their future is in good hands.
Yeah.
So to me, what really matters in terms of our use of AI is it serving the good, the public good, or not? And we need to have regulations. So I'm a physician. We use AI in a couple different ways. I'm really excited about how we use it. I am a meticulous, detail oriented physician. I highly prize relationships, which means, in translation, I'm a terrible, slow documenter. So I was spending anywhere from 12 to 20 hours a week doing my documentation. Awful.
Yeah.
I now have AI. It does not like record things to some secret server, but it does write out in real time a note that makes sense of what the patient is saying and what I am saying. So by the time I'm done seeing the patient, it's like 2 minutes later, there's a note. Now I need to check it, make sure it's accurate, that it's actually, saying the right thing. Sometimes I forget to tell it that I'm speaking in Spanish, so it tries to make sense of my Spanish speaking in English, which is
Okay.
always entertaining. Um, but it's phenomenal.
Right.
And it really helps. Not only does it help me in my timeliness, but very soon I should be able to take the plan that comes out of what AI is saying and then just add it to the document that the patient leaves with. So they actually have a full record of the plan as they leave. By the way, in terms of your other half of the AI question
Uh-huh.
on the energy and water consumption, I
Yeah.
talk about accountable capitalism on my website, but every, you know, for-profit industry should absolutely be held accountable for all of their quote unquote downstream effects. And in this
Right.
one, we're literally talking about downstream.
Right.
Mhm.
What do you perceive to be your plan for reaching out to independent voters, centrists, and even right-wing voters, because like you
Sure.
said, this district is red.
Um, so this is honestly something that again I do every day is look for
Mhm.
common ground.
Right.
The number of parents that come in that, discipline and educate and feed their kids differently than what I would do. And the amount of times that I get an opportunity to say, here's all the things that you're doing well. Um, and that's every day. And with voters that might have a different background than me or different beliefs than me, I think it's really easy to say, guess what? We all want our kids to be raised in safe communities. We all want our economies to be growing and thriving. We can all admit that rural economies have been totally abandoned by this country. Unfortunately, the Democrats have literally stated, oh, that's flyover country. They have literally given
Right.
up on rural America as a constituency. But unfortunately, the Republicans who are catering to rural voters are not delivering for them any
Right.
better than anyone else. So I think there's something to be said for being authentic and saying, I know the Democratic Party has abandoned you.
Right.
I understand that we think agriculture can't be a part of the Democrat platform, at least large scale agriculture. And that's on us because guess what? Large scale agriculture is here. And by turning our backs on it, all we're doing is saying that we don't have a plan for that. And
Right.
that's ridiculous. There is no reason that we can't figure out with the innovation and ingenuity in the United States how to make large scale farming work for us in terms of environmentalism, how to
Yeah.
make large scale farming work for the smaller scale farms too, and not have to compete against each other. The other thing I would just say is that, again, I'm not just blaming Trump for the problems that are currently going on, which is one of the weaknesses, I think, just to try and differentiate myself, not to pick on my colleagues, but to differentiate myself. I am not running because Trump is all of these things that people don't like, that it's making people nervous. I am running because we have a system that has failed us for a long time. I think Trump came to power as a result of a system that was failing us for a long
Right.
time. And
Right.
so I am not just here to get rid of Trump and his policies that I think are not working for us and that are quite frankly undemocratic and unconstitutional. I am running so that our whole country that has been, drifting across into a government that is not working for the common person I'm running to set that ship right.
Yeah.
And I think that goes far beyond just trying to counter Trump's policies. And I think that resonates with our CD2 voters because their lives did not suddenly just get bad with Trump.
No.
Rural communities, agricultural based communities have been suffering long before Trump came to power. So we need to be looking more broadly. We need to be looking at common ground issues, and we need to be reassuring people that we have more in common than we do apart. Um, which is also why, like, I'm not out there promoting impeachment. I'm not out there promoting, do unto them as they did to us. I am like, hey,
Because who in your district is getting fed from that? Who in
right,
your district is
right,
getting employ
yes,
more employment or
yeah.
whatever? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I
one of
get that
my
it
colleagues
solves a problem
has taken
for,
a
yeah,
pledge to impeach everyone in the cabinet in her first year in office. And I'm like, how many bills can we pass to feed people and to right the ship if everyone on the docket is focused on impeaching, 15 different cabinet people? And I understand the moral compass that makes someone want to do that. We want to right the wrongs, but the wrongs have been ongoing long before. And if we keep going, they did this, we did this, they did this, we do not give hope for our future.
but yeah,
At all.
under what circumstances would you accept corporate or PAC money?
Um, I can't imagine a circumstance where I would take corporate PAC money. Just because business, I mean, it's really hard because I'm not anti-economy. I'm not anti-business. You need business to be able to employ people. So again, the view that Democrats should be like and I know they don't say they're anti-business, but
Right.
it's well understood in certain areas that you don't go to the Chamber of Commerce. And I'm like, hello,
Why
those are
not?
our employers.
Yeah, people are there. People that do
Yes,
things are there.
certainly, I think it's really important that you're not collaborating with a corporate pact that allows business donors to be anonymous. I think that's one of the main things. So, for example, I could imagine a local business saying, yes, we want to support you. I would want that to be in the form of a support that is transparent to the
Mhm.
community, that is reportable, that is not, a PAC committee that's partnering but not partnering with our campaign to get things done. So when there's transparency and when they're under the donor amount, I could see that being potential just because, of course, we're collaborating with all sorts of community members.
Yeah. You're
But
not going to say no to somebody
thus
who wants to
far,
participate in good faith, you know?
yes,
I mean, if
yes.
they're there for the same reason that you are, and they don't need to like massage you into thinking
Hmm.
something that you didn't come to the table with, yeah,
Right.
that makes sense to me. So let me ask you another money related question, and this one is also fairly spicy. Um, Will you make your support for foreign aid to any country contingent on that nation's adherence to international law and human rights?
So, um, the main country I can think where this applies right now would be Israel, but I know there's certainly other countries that we've contributed to in the past. Um, in terms of supporting the country, giving money to the country, I would absolutely make that contingent upon them upholding basic laws for human rights. Um, I do want to just call out that at the same time, giving money to nonprofit or non-governmental organizations in those countries would be really important. So, like the USAID money that's being given straight to the nonprofits, um, I just want to say that like that is separate in my mind because
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that way
yeah.
you're actually supporting the
That's
very
that's
groups that
American
maybe,
soft power. That's how
yeah,
we used to anyway
yeah,
before they were defunded last year. That's how we used to
mhm,
influence other nations without sending CIA goons in there to
yeah,
topple the
and to
regime.
demonstrate our actual goodwill, which
Right. What are your thoughts about closing off public land to use
Mm.
for potentially hazardous resource extraction. And there's a couple of very niche examples. One that I'm particularly worried about, which is the gold cyanidation mine. It's
Uh-huh.
470 acres in Vale, Oregon, which is not too far away from our buddy Cliff Benz.
Yeah.
You know, this stuff is dangerous and it was fast tracked through. Um,
Hmm.
but I want to know whether what your thoughts are on how you would approach resource extraction in the second district.
So I think it's interesting when we think about any of this stuff. So, what's the biggest thing that's making us behind China in terms of being able to support modernization and computers and solar panels, right? It's our lack of mines for some very specific elements. I don't know if those elements include gold. I don't
Oh,
know
they
if we
do. No, no, you're
want to
absolutely
mine
right.
gold just to plate the ballroom. Is that
No, no,
why we
no,
have,
no. I
I'm
mean,
kidding.
it's all
Tongue in
about
cheek.
phones and iPads and
Uh-huh.
everything's got gold and
Yes.
lithium and yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
and I know silver is a great conductor and all of that. So
right,
the point being that we need to understand that when we are not, you know, we can save the trees in the United States
right,
and then end up pillaging forests in Brazil and in
right,
Southeast Asia and end up doing far more harm to the overall environment than if we would have just kept regulated logging here.
right.
And I think that is, man, this this goes into my talk about innovation.
Mm,
The United States has a history of being innovators and problem solvers. And the idea that we can't figure out how to mine gold without using chemicals that then totally decimate natural, ecological balance
for
in the
decades. Yeah,
environment for decades or centuries
right. Yeah,
and protect the people that are directly impacted in that time is crazy to me. Like, we can figure this out. We just have to have the political will and the investment to figure it out. So, fine, identify where the gold and silver mines are, and then identify who's going to come up with the technology and the infrastructure to hold groups accountable. Is it going to make it more expensive? Yes. But it also could actually increase the jobs, right? So I
right.
read about the Vale mine. They think it'll have 200 jobs. They're not forever jobs, though. They're honestly looking at extraction for like less than 10 years of
Yeah.
doing the extraction job, and then 20 years later of environmental monitoring. Well,
Oh, right.
what
Yeah,
if we
that's right. I forgot
majorly
about that.
increase? What if we majorly increase the work that is created by having more environmental regulation, more people working on infrastructure to make sure that the cyanide, water
Right,
does not end up going into the aquifers and whatnot. So
right,
I think there are ways we can do it. We just have to have the political will. The other thing I was thinking about with this is we can do it as soon as we actually prize water as an equally vital resource as gold, right?
yeah,
And the fact of the matter
right,
is, fresh water is in short supply. We don't think it is, but it is. And as soon as and we know that in Oregon, that it's in short supply, we have all sorts of, folks that are struggling to find water to irrigate crops and all
mhm,
sorts of things. So we know that. And as soon as we start treating water as the incredibly priceless resource that it is, then we will match the needs of the mining industries and the water protection
right,
and our health, right? And one of the ways we do that is we make the corporations that are affecting the water pay for the water because all of a sudden they prize it,
right,
right? So accountable capitalism. If you're putting in the dollar, if you're extracting the dollars, then you need to be beholden to whatever else happens. And we
hmm,
need to have people regulating that. And as soon as you do that, all of a sudden, the downstream effects will disappear. Also, if our government was in charge of our healthcare costs, then we would care about the health ramifications of the pollution. So
Right.
when our government is pulling, you know, tax dollars and getting money from these contracts and whatnot, and they're not being held responsible for the health effects, then they don't have as much of a vested interest. Now, I would love to think that people are so kind and that, of course, they care. But the fact of the matter is, we see this all over, right? That
Right.
our government is not having to be responsible for all of the health related outcomes of their choices, their policy choices. And until those two things are combined, you're not going to have an equal prioritization of those concerns.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Mr. Cliff Bentz, on our congressperson?
I mean, I've heard he's a nice guy. I've heard he's kind of like your neighborhood grandpa, and I think that's great. Um, what I've seen is an interview where he was challenged about Medicaid and why he voted to cut Medicaid for when 40% of his constituents are on it.
Right.
His comment was, well, only 33% of my constituents are on it. They need to get that right. And that's true if you only look at voting constituents, but when you include children, it's
Right.
actually 42%. So, you know, if you consider constituents to be only the people that are of legal age to vote for you, then I guess he has a point. Regardless, he then went on to say that the real concern there is that if 33% of people are on Medicaid, that means 33% of my constituents aren't working, and that's what we need to solve.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the idea that he thinks that folks that are on Medicaid aren't working shows he's completely unhinged from reality. People
Right.
are on, and maybe that's why he can't solve the problems, right? If you really think that people that are on Medicaid are just sitting on their smartphones, not watching their kids adequately, just standing around looking for handouts. Maybe you think, well, we need to make cuts and we need to make sure every 6 months we're checking that these folks are working. But the fact of the matter is, people on Medicaid are working. Over almost about half of them are working full time, and that's of all comers between 18 and 65. About half of them are working full time. Another almost 30% are working part time, and then there's a small amount of those that are full time students
Hmm.
or that are actually providing full time care for, you know, folks that can't care for themselves in their home, and then a small number of them, I think it's about 10% ish, are actually disabled themselves
Right.
that are receiving Medicaid in Oregon.
Yeah.
And so the vast majority of people on Medicaid are working. They're working to the extent that they can work, and they're not getting paid adequately, which is why they're on Medicaid. And so if you think people, if your perspective is 1/3 of my constituency is just standing around waiting for handouts, then I guess you get the kind of service that Cliff Bentz is
Right.
providing.
Right.
Right. Well, another thing just good to know about Cliff Bentz is he's in the
Oh.
1 percentile for the number of bills that he's put forward. Also, he has not had a single bipartisan co-sponsor, nor has he co-sponsored anyone on the other side of the aisle.
Yep. Yep.
So it just shows you that loyalty to his party is his number one thing. And he's
Yes.
also said that himself, you know, I'm going to do what the president tells me to do. And my question to that is, what is the point of having a voted representative if all they're going to do is exactly what the president tells them to do?
Right.
That is part of the executive branch. They do what the president and his, you know, guys, his cabinet tell them to do. The
Right.
representatives are supposed to be closer to the constituents. They're supposed to be closer to the real concerns. They're supposed to understand that there's variability in how these, you know, bills hit the different areas. So the fact that Bentz was not standing up and saying, excuse me, Mr. President, these tariffs are going to hit hard in communities that have already been suffering for decades.
Yeah.
And I understand that you want to have the role of chasing tariffs. Can we just sit down and look at how commodities pricing is going to hurt my neighbors, my next door
Right.
neighbors, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that he's not standing up for the constituents is a concern. So what would I do differently? One, I would honestly look for any way, especially because the next 2 years we still have a Republican as head of the executive branch.
Right.
And the only way that changes is if we get a a Democrat led House, and we impeach both Vance and President Trump. And then suddenly the Speaker of the House, who knows who that would be at the time, would be president. So, one can dream.
I
But
mean,
the fact of the matter is,
it's
we're
like
still going to
it's
have to work.
worse than the West Wing. It's like a fantasy from, just like, yeah.
Yeah.
But to your point, we can't lean on that as being our
No.
prime through line solution. We have to solve
And
things. Yeah.
like I said, this whole idea of taking all of our time to do that rather than trying to rebuild what has been toppled. And a great, in terms of policy and the safety net for the United States, we've been cracking and crumbling for a long time. This administration has been an earthquake. But if all we do is rebuild to the cracks and crumbles, then we are not setting ourselves up for a good future. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the other thing is that if we are so unilateral in our building of bills, just like we saw with some of these great bills that Biden's team passed, guess what? They didn't have enough bipartisan participation, which meant that the other side was not invested enough in keeping them on the books, so they were overturned. And we can do the exact same thing, have all these, let's pretend that we have someone up that's going to sign off on everything we legislate.
Right.
It's just going to get undone if we don't have bipartisan participation. Not only that, I love this quote that Oregon legislature is the pro at unintended consequences. And I honestly think that part of that is because we don't have both sides of the aisle weighing in on every bill.
Right. Right. Or they're only
So,
willing to speak to their own bills and criticize anything that didn't
yes,
originate from their,
yes.
line of scrimmage. Yeah.
Mhm. And the fact of the matter is that when we are so focused on what we want to change and we are discounting every objection as invalid, ideological, then we're not actually dealing with the landmines that are going to come up. That if we would just listen and pause for a second and be like, oh, that's going to be a sticking point. Let's pause and think about that. Let's figure out how we're going to help our agricultural partners that rely on strong agribusiness to get through that sticking point rather than just saying, oh, this is just a ploy to defeat this bill. Instead, hold them at their word. Okay, guess what? This is going to pass, and I don't want it to negatively affect our community. So let's figure out a way to solve it within this bill because we're
Yeah.
passing it. Sure. To be honest, though, what I really think is the problem is that we haven't had a future focused agenda for a long time. And you mentioned wall putty. I call it scotch tape. And I just spent a week in Washington advocating on behalf of rural health. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the number of bills the National Rural Health Association is putting before legislators to advocate for different components of what we need, whether it's infrastructure like broadband, whether it's, workforce issues like getting more nurses trained in rural areas or getting rural residencies in rural areas, each individual or, community health workers or specific bills to allow for testing in pharmacies, right? Like so many bills.
Yeah.
Dozens and dozens. And it's overwhelming because each individual bill needs to be presented to a committee, then it needs to be advocated for, and then it needs to be brought to the floor, and it needs to be somebody's pet priority. And it may just be, hey, we'd like to do this testing in pharmacies. And you get that bill passed, and guess what? You still have dozens of other bills to make this even come close to working, which is where I got overwhelmed at the scotch tape. We have
Right.
so many scotch tape initiatives, and we have been utilizing the same book for decades.
Right.
The bindings are wearing out. It doesn't have a
Right.
cover, and our response is, I have some scotch tape. The fact of the matter is, it's time to rewrite the books. And one of the things I think is so frustrating is we think that if the founding fathers didn't talk about it, then it must not be intended for our government.
Right.
Like the founding fathers didn't say we should do healthcare. Guess what healthcare was back in the
Well, the
day?
good news is that they made it very clear how they feel about trans athletes, so we don't have to wonder about that, right?
Yes. Oh man. Yes. So there's so many things that they didn't talk about. And does that mean no, but they left? I mean, honestly, when you really look at this stuff, they had so much genius of understanding that there was going to be a future that they could not even contemplate
Right.
and that they couldn't totally prepare for by making every law. And so they did the best they could. And then they said, and then utilize these principles to further
Right.
do the work of supporting life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, which, by the way, I know are in the Declaration of Independence, not the
But it
Constitution. The
may
Constitution
be
is
may
other
as
things
well
that
be
has,
written on the
yes,
soul of anyone that wants to be in America,
yes,
so yeah.
yeah. So the point is that the idea that we can't provide healthcare as a public good or a right to clean water, clean air, and a safe ground beneath your feet is ridiculous just because it's not in the Constitution. And so I think honestly, so I came up with an idea, and then someone's like, actually, Pete Buttigieg has a very similar one. I'm like, oh, great, that's amazing. So he has a 2054 era, new era 2054.
Hmm.
In my brain in the middle of the night, I came up with the blueprint 2050. And I like blueprint because it's on the Democratic side, right?
Yeah,
But in
right.
the end, it can be bipartisan, whatever you want to do. The point is, we have to think to ourselves, what do we want our future to look like? Do we want it to look like our grandparents being homeless
Yeah.
or not able to pay for their medications? Do we want it to look like billionaires having so much money they honestly do not even know what to do with it, but they're still getting more? Like,
Right.
do we want it to look like nobody can buy a home until they're 60 and they're still paying off their student debt? Like, what do we want our future to look like? And then we say to ourselves, we want everyone to have access to, I'm going to say healthcare, okay?
Mm.
In 2050, we want everyone to have access to healthcare. What do we do to make that dream a reality in the here and now? What do we do as, we're still in the Scotch tape era. Yep, we're still going to have to use the Scotch tape. But in the meantime, let's put together the plans for what it's going to look like in the future because we cannot have 30 to 40 more years of
Right.
flipping the same speeches and a
Popsicle
bunch of
sticks
Scotch
and,
tape.
and Scotch tape. Yeah. I do
Yeah,
want to
no worries.
say that you have brought some really amazing insights, some things that I had not thought through. And I just want you to know how grateful I am for your time and for
Yeah,
this conversation, just for me to enrich myself in terms of my understanding of, the issues, but then also perspective coming from your background and then wanting
yeah,
to do, the most good for the most people. And so I just want to thank you for your time and
yeah.
and,
Thank you
and
so much.
being open and honest with me. And I look forward to following your candidacy, finding
Yeah,
out more
thanks.
about what you're up to.